Hello, and welcome to this lecture on Martin Luther and how he started the Protestant Reformation, some factors that played into it, and what we see come out of it. Just to note, this is only one component of the Protestant Reformation in Europe, Lutheranism. There's other religions and denominations that are come out of this, such as Anglicanism, Anabaptism, Calvinism, etc. So we're going to focus on those later, but for this lecture, we'll focus on Lutheranism and where that kind of came from. One note too, Protestantism in general is a group of religions, coming from the term to protest. So these religions are protesting the rules, regulations, corruption, etc. from the Catholic Church. So they're protesting the Catholic Church. And anyone that's not Catholic today, outside of Eastern Orthodox religions and some things like that, if they're Christian today but they're not Catholic, there's a good chance in America at least they're probably part of the Protestant group. So let's look at Martin Luther. So Martin Luther, a little bit of background on him. He's a German monk. He studied in Germany, near Wittenberg, Germany. He was a humanist. He studied, some of those liberal arts and histories and things like that you'd study. His first focus was becoming a lawyer. He was really interested in that. But he had a near-death experience, and he was almost struck and killed by lightning. So that moment of truth caused him to reflect, and he changed his life course. He decided that he'd rather go on a religious pathway, following the Catholic Church and doing things like that, rather than, studying university, studying law, etc. So we see him kind of go and start to study religion very intently and very meticulously. Again, the only game in town was the Catholic Church in the early 1500s, before his work and the work of people near him. So that's what he did. He focused on studying Catholicism and some of the big ideas surrounding the Catholic Church. And he became really consumed with faith and confession. In the Catholic Church, a practice that still exists today is that you can confess your sins. So a sin is something wrong that you do. Confession is a practice in which you go into the church, you go into a private room or vestibule with a priest, and you confess your sins, what you did wrong in the eyes of God. And that if the priest will then give you, some sort of task to do, such as donating to charity or saying a number of prayers a number of times, and then you're supposed to be absolved. Martin Luther questioned this practice that had been around for a decent while. He said, how can this affect anything? How can this bring salvation? How does God know to listen to you? There's, millions, billions of people out there. What if you forget to confess a sin? Does that sin stay with you forever? You're not going to confession every day, most likely. What if it's really hard for you to remember all those things? So he kind of focuses on that, and that kind of leads him to the idea of salvation. Another one of his big focuses and things he kind of gets really stuck on. The Roman Catholic Church at the time focused on the idea that in order to be saved or go to heaven, to have a promising afterlife, you must not just have faith in God, but also support that faith with good works. So you must tithe or donate to the church, about at least 10% of your income, even if you're a poor peasant. You must donate your time to the church, and you must do the acts that the church asks you to do all the sacraments, getting married, confession, baptism, all those things, donating your time, and again, going to church every week. And Martin Luther kind of became focused on this as well. He was focused on the idea that the Bible, which is the word of Jesus, the word of God, doesn't have evidence for this. He didn't really see the Bible requiring people to do all this and that to get to heaven. So he starts to question this as well. He believed, as many people did, I shouldn't say many, but as some people did, that the Bible is the chief guide on getting to heaven and salvation and following the work of Jesus and the work of God. Why should the Catholic Church kind of come in with these outside things that aren't necessarily written down in the Bible and tell, the people of Europe that, hey, you have to follow the Bible, but you also have to do these extra things too, which aren't listed in the Bible, which 9 times out of 10 benefited the Catholic Church, got them more money, got them more volunteers and things like that, got them, more people more involved in the church. So By the time 1517 rolls around, Luther already has some questions, some big questions, as others did. We've talked about in the last lecture that there was other people that questioned the Catholic Church and their corruption and things like that prior to Luther. He was not the first one. However, things change. What we see in Germany in 1517 is Johann Tetzel, a Catholic leader, comes to Germany. He is selling on behalf of the Pope at the time, Pope Leo X. He is selling indulgences. Indulgences are a get out of purgatory free card, more or less. So just to kind of back up a bit, purgatory, according again to Christianity at this time, and I guess today, at least Catholicism today, I would say, it was kind of like a waiting room for heaven. So let's say, we know that, Christians believe if you're good, you go to heaven. If you're bad, you go to hell. If you commit sins, you go to hell. If you're sin-free, you go to heaven. Purgatory is this idea that, let's say you weren't really too bad, but you did some sinful things that you didn't repent for or you didn't confess. Purgatory, therefore, is a waiting room for heaven. You might wait there for, a couple days, weeks, but if, we're talking afterlife, it could be days, months, years, centuries you're waiting in purgatory, depending on what you did or didn't do in your lifetime. So indulgences, as the Catholic Church was making it known to the people of Europe, they were get out of purgatory free cards. So let's say you had a sentence of, 10 years in purgatory. An indulgence, if you purchased it from the Catholic Church while you're on earth, it would, cut your purgatory waiting time down to 0. Or, maybe a little bit less than that if you were forced to maybe buy more than one indulgence ticket. So these were going around, and there's no way for no one to know about this, right? This is all talking about the afterlife. And again, Europeans were incredibly religious at this time. They truly believed in, the scariness of the afterlife and hell and things like that. And they lived miserable lives in Europe at this time because they were willing to sacrifice now for, an eternal, grateful afterlife. So they were willing to, be, mistreated peasants and abused by their lords and masters in society because they knew that the afterlife was going to be glorious. The Catholic Church capitalized on this fear and knowledge that peasants had and began selling indulgences across Europe, mostly to pay for, St. Peter's Basilica. If you've been to the Vatican City in Rome today, that's, a lot of those buildings were paid for with indulgences and things like that. John Tetzel goes to Wittenberg near Germany, and he's selling these things, and Martin Luther happens to be near him. He hears this sales pitch, and this was the final straw for Martin Luther. So Luther goes to Wittenberg Castle in the same area after staying up all night writing these things out, and he nails to the church to the door of Wittenberg Castle 95 theses, or 95 statements declaring major problems that he saw with the Catholic Church, with indulgences, and with the Church's methods of salvation. So he issues these, and then, of course, as you can probably guess here by looking at this image, again, this is from a movie, not from real life, of course, but you can probably guess that these were also printed with the printing press. Printing press, is about 60, 70 years old at this point in time, so people do know how to use it, and it's spread pretty quickly across Europe. So he's going to have access to a printing press. So these are not just nailed to the church door, but also spread across Germany and then Europe. So these start to make their way across Europe. The Catholic Church hears about these, and there's really no response at the beginning. The Pope calls Luther a drunkard, and they kind of leave it at that for the time being. Germany, however, is really interested in some of these ideas that Luther spreads. What are some reactions to Martin Luther? Johann Eck, again, someone who's pro-Catholic Church, calls Luther a heretic, which again is a religious criminal. They compare him to Jan Hus, the guy whose goose got cooked in the fire, a couple decades prior for trying to start a new religion, a new form of Christianity. Luther doubles down and triples down. Luther loved the printing press. He loved to argue and squabble and debate people. If someone printed an argument against him, he would be ready with a response and get it printed out and spread. So Luther made very good use of the printing press, one of the first people to really kind of take advantage of the medium of printing and getting your word out quickly. He was so impactful that you could argue, not only did the printing press help Luther, but Luther helped the printing press spread. Printers, again, would print anything that sold. So people loved to read printers' writings. People loved, if they couldn't read, which many Europeans could not, people loved to see the cartoons and the woodcut prints, depicting the Pope as the Antichrist, which is a very common theme in picture printing at this time. Like I said, it's very debatable who helped who more. You could argue either way. The printing helped Luther, or Luther helped printing, because he was just so popular to read. Again, I compared it to social media. And today, people love to get on social media when people are fighting, and you retweet or you like things and share things across platforms. That was happening with printing, hundreds of years ago. It was that impactful. He then issues some pamphlets, again, that were very popular. He calls on the nobles, the German princes of the Holy Roman Empire. Again, Holy Roman Empire is, pre-modern Germany. It's a collection of German states in Central Europe. They were mostly German, and each had their own little prince ruler that kind of ruled over that area. But it was broken down into many different smaller states as well. But Luther called on these German princes to not listen to the Roman Pope or the Italian Pope. They should listen to the people of Germany, who kind of want a religious change. He also then goes on in another pamphlet, he goes on to attack the different sacraments of the church. Things like having your first communion, confessing your sins, getting married, baptizing your kid. He asks in this second pamphlet, why is it that the Catholic Church gets to hold these important life moments captive? Why can't people celebrate them on their own without being tied to the Catholic Church? Which is a fair point. If you want to, if you and your child want to celebrate Jesus or something like that, why do you have to go to a church to do so? And why, when you die, why are you, again, held captive? Why is your soul held captive by the church in a sense? So he has some thought-provoking questions. Finally, in the third pamphlet, he issued tons of these. I just kind of highlighted a couple different ones for you. He said that faith alone is good enough for salvation. Again, that initial question that Luther had about how to get saved, almost dying to that lightning strike, caused him to think about salvation. If why do I have to get saved? Why does one have to not just have faith but also donate time, money, energy to the church? Why isn't just reading the Bible good enough? He's publishing these works. He's debating people. Anyone who will debate him, he'll debate back, and whether it's in person or in printed form. The church, after a few years, has kind of enough, and they issue a papal bull against him. They threaten him with excommunication in 1521, which is kicking one person out of or a group of people, in this case it's just Luther, out of the Catholic Church in 1521, which is a very dreadful sentence to get. Again, in this period, people are very religious. To be kicked out of the church meant that you were almost certainly going to hell for eternity, which would be awful for people. People did crazy things to get out of being excommunicated. Walking barefoot to Rome, on their knees to beg forgiveness for the Pope, right? Monarchs, lords, nobles did that, in the centuries prior, because they were so worried about excommunication. So they issue the papal bull excommunicating him, and he's summoned to recant for his life, pretty much, in the Diet of Worms, which is in front of the new Holy Roman Emperor Charles V, who we'll talk about in a second. Now, if you paid attention to the last lecture, this might sound kind of familiar to what happened to Jan Hus. Jan Hus was summoned in front of the Pope, the leader of the Catholic Church, and he was double-crossed and killed for appearing in person. Luther does go there. He refuses to recant, though. He says, "Here I stand, I can do no otherwise," and he refuses to recant. And he actually escapes from the Pope with the help from the Elector of Saxony, who was a German noble. So this first pamphlet here worked. The Elector of Saxony, a German prince who's right below the Holy Roman Emperor in terms of hierarchy, which I'll explain more about in a second, saved Luther. Why, you might ask? Well, if you think back to the new monarchy model that we talked about previously, the biggest challenge to kings, queens, emperors in this time were nobles, because they also wanted that position of being top dog in Europe, or top dog in the nation or kingdom. So the Elector of Saxony may or may not have been sympathetic to Lutherans' religious ideas, but he definitely was sympathetic to challenging the emperor of the Holy Roman Empire, Charles V, who we'll talk more about in a second. After Luther escapes Worms, Charles V and the Pope issued the Edict of Worms, and mostly Charles V, I should say. He is now an outlaw in the Holy Roman Empire. His works are to be burned and censored and destroyed. He has a bounty on his head, so if you find Luther, if you can get his head, you can kill him and you can get some money. But again, he is still kept safe and secure by the Elector of Saxony. German peasants hear this across the Holy Roman Empire. They rebel, thinking that, wow, we have a challenge to the Holy Roman Emperor, we have a challenge to the Pope, who are working hand in hand to support one another because they're both very Catholic. This is a time for social upheaval. So peasants across the Holy Roman Empire rebel, thinking that times are changing. They are wrong, though. They rebel, but Luther does not support them. Now think about that for a second. Why wouldn't Luther support the peasants? I'll let you think for a couple seconds, or you can pause the video. So if you weren't aware, like I said, in this time of social hierarchy, you have the king or the emperor on top, then you have the nobles, lords, and below them are the peasants. If Luther supported the peasants in their social upheaval and their unrest, because they were committing violent acts against nobles, etc., that would probably turn the Elector of Saxony against him. The Elector of Saxony's own peasants would then turn against Luther and the Elector, and then Luther would be out of protection. So he was forced some upheaval, but not too much that kind of would destroy the Holy Roman Empire and make his protector, the Elector of Saxony, get sick of him. Why was Luther successful? So he was successful for a number of reasons. Number one, like I said, the printing press. The Bible has been translated into German at this point, and the vernacular language. Make sure you know that word, vernacular. Even though Germany was only 5% literate, the pictures that were present and printed at this time could persuade people. So this was a popular move to push for the translation of the Bible into German so more people could read it, but also to push for pictures. He supported Christian humanism, even though Erasmus, the OG Christian humanist, and Luther did not like each other, and Erasmus did not leave the Catholic Church. Overall, Luther was supportive of those ideas, so we see Christian humanists kind of support Luther as well. Luther didn't want to change everything, and that's kind of the case for a lot of these Protestant religions. They didn't go too far away from Christianity. Anabaptists, the ones who probably did go the furthest from Christianity, they were despised by Lutherans, Calvinists, and Catholics alike. No one liked Anabaptists, and I'll talk about them in a future lecture, maybe some reasons why. But Luther didn't change too many things. He kept some sacraments around, such as baptism and communion, and he questioned things like transubstantiation, which is the idea, and I'll explain this in the future as well, that when Catholics have Mass, they bring bread and wine, which during the ritual becomes the body and blood of Christ, respectively. Transubstantiation is the idea that Jesus' soul enters the bread and the wine to become the body and blood of Christ. Lutherans and Calvinists and Catholics all have different views on this, and this is the biggest thing. But he kind of denies this a bit, but he's not as strict on it as different Protestant groups are. Again, his debating of religious ideas were very popular. People loved to listen and read his ideas and hear the arguments and the gossip and things like that. And then lastly, besides the wood printing press again over here, you can look at that on your own. Luther played into this new monarch / noble / lord dynamic that we have going on again. if you're a monarch in this period, you've got to look out for the nobles below you who could rise up and take power from you. Luther was very keen to play into this dynamic. He got the Elector of Saxony, a lord, to support him in his endeavors. The Elector of Saxony, didn't change or convert to Lutheranism in his lifetime. There's some evidence that he maybe did it on his deathbed, but during his entire life, the Elector of Saxony did not, outwardly convert to Martin Luther's upcoming religion. So, the point is that, this was a political move. These nobles, the first one being the Elector of Saxony, are going to support Luther or his ideas, not because they like him or his religious ideas, but because they can stick it to the Holy Roman Emperor or other monarchs. This is going to be a trend in Europe starting in 1517, the year of Martin Luther's 95 Theses. Nobles across Europe, whether they like their religion or not, they're going to convert to one religion or another to challenge the monarch in power. If your monarch is one religion, you can get a base of support by converting to another religion. And again, they're not converting to, Islam or Judaism. They're still staying Christians, but they can maybe change a few of their religious beliefs a bit and get a base of support from people who want to fight against the king or the queen or whoever. So we see this is a political power move, not just a religious power move. All right, getting into the dynamics of the Holy Roman Empire, let's look at a man named Jakob Fugger. Jakob Fugger was a merchant in the late early 1500s, and he was very, 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 very rich. He had as one estimate puts, about $400 billion in today's money at one point in time, which if you brought up all the money in Europe today, all of the income in Europe at that time, he would have about 2% of Europe's wealth at this point in time. So a very rich man. He made his money through mining, through selling, trading goods, and banking. And his family kind of also followed in his footsteps with those same types of trades. So an incredibly wealthy man, one of the richest men that has ever lived. But why is he important? Well, when we look at the Holy Roman Empire in this time, okay, it's a collection of German states. And to become the Holy Roman Emperor of this time period, it's not necessarily passed down through heredity or from parents to kids. That's what you're seeing in Spain, France, England at this time, and most of Europe, to be fair. What you're seeing in the Holy Roman Empire is an election. The Holy Roman Emperor is usually a monarch from a different country or a neighboring area who is elected by the electors of the Holy Roman Empire. And in this case, in this illustration here, you see 7, who are some archbishops. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, 7. Sorry. But you see these electors here, and some are religiously based, such as these archbishops, but some are princes or nobles. So you see a variety of electors here. Their job is to meet and choose who the Holy Roman Emperor will be. Around the time of Martin Luther, we see a young man from Spain who is actually the child, or descendant, I should say, of Ferdinand and Isabella, the new monarchs of Spain. He is actually elected to become the Holy Roman Emperor. And Jakob Fugger gives the money, the funds to do that. He gives this young man a lot of money to pay off and to bribe these electors so that he can become the emperor. And who is this person? It's Charles V. Again, Charles V, he is the grandchild of Isabella and Ferdinand. He is related to Catherine of Aragon, who marries Henry VIII, the guy that had 6 wives. She is the first wife of Henry VIII. Philip II of Spain is his kid, and we'll talk more about this family in a second. As you can maybe tell, he's a Habsburg. His father here has a Habsburg chin, so he will be a part of that family as well. But he is elected emperor through money, through getting enough money from Jakob Fugger and buying off the electors to vote for him. The King of France and the King of England were also up for the election, but they didn't have as much money as Charles V. Charles V had lots of money coming in from many places. And he's actually heir to a gigantic empire. If you look down here in the bottom left, he has all these green lands there under him: Spain, lots of the Holy Roman Empire, lots of Italy, and this new holy big empire in the New World that's under the Spanish crown. So he has access to just a gigantic empire, enormous wealth, and he's very easily able to buy off the votes he needs to become the Holy Roman Emperor, coming from Spain and their enormous wealth at this time too. So he has a gigantic empire, and you think you could maybe see him becoming like one of the great European rulers of all time, but he really doesn't. Maybe it's because he was inbred with Habsburg blood or something like that. It just doesn't really pan out for him. Martin Luther probably was a part of that too, but he just kind of fizzles out, and he doesn't really, not to spoil his story, but he doesn't really make much of his lucky circumstances that were given to him. Number one, he faced lots of conflicts in his life besides, Martin Luther and Martin Luther's religious turmoil that he was causing across Germany, which Charles V, being a very devout Catholic, had to deal with. He had to fight the French. The French are, trying to take some land from the Holy Roman Empire for over 20 years. The Pope was kind of being annoying to him, telling him to go against, get Luther and things like that. And, he had to deal with the Pope and the Pope's problem. So that was an issue for him to deal with. He even, got so mad at the Pope that he actually attacked Rome, the city of Rome, and, caused massive amounts of damage to the Rome. He then took the Pope more or less hostage and forced the Pope to even be more Catholic and more anti-Luther. So again, this is a new monarch trend of controlling the Catholic Church. Charles V, who was very Catholic, took that literally and, captured the Pope and held him hostage, doing some pretty violently awful things you can read about here if you go to the guide to these notes, to these lectures. The Ottoman Turks are causing problems as well. Since 1453, they are expanding across Europe, and they even get to Vienna eventually. So he has to deal with them and push them back. Vienna's over here, so they almost breach into the Holy Roman Empire. And like I said, Germany is a collection of German states. There is no central authority there. So he has to deal with all of those princes and people that are rising up against him, those nobles and princes that are causing him problem. They form the Schmalkaldic League to defend themselves against Charles V, who has a war on many fronts, again, against the French, against the Turks, against Italy, against Luther, and now against his own nobles. So he has war on all fronts, just everything is going wrong for him. Luther dies in 1546. You think that might be the end of the Protestant uprising. You are wrong. Luther allies, those princes left over, they ally with Catholic France, which is kind of astonishing. And this is going to be a theme that we're going to see. If you have these Protestant princes ally with Catholic France, it can't be for religious reasons, right? Because they have different religions. It's for political reasons. And we're going to see France take keen advantage of this dynamic throughout the next 100, 200 years. They're going to take advantage of this situation and weaken the Holy Roman Empire in order to strengthen themselves. France's borders get bigger than this. They're not going to stay that small for very long. So France is supporting these princes against Charles V, even though Charles V's forces and France were both very Catholic. So frustrated with all of this infighting and turmoil and warfare that he has to deal with, he gives up. So less than 10 years after Luther dies, we see Charles V issue the Peace of Augsburg, which is a German city. This allows German princes within the Holy Roman Empire to choose their own religion for their domain, whether it's Catholicism or Luther's new religion, Lutheranism, which he founded before he passed away. And here's the Latin term for that down there. So this is impactful. So if you're the German Prince of Bohemia, for example, you could establish a Lutheran state, and that would be legal under the Holy Roman Empire. Charles V did this to be pragmatic. He didn't want, to lose his control over the entire empire, or for his successor to lose control of the empire. He wanted people to the empire to stay intact, even if that meant giving up some land to Protestant religions rather than the Catholic religion. So this is going to be an early example of the balance of power and some sort of deal-making type of capabilities in order to kind of not limit the power loss of the Holy Roman Empire too much. So he gives up, he issues the Peace of Augsburg, and then he actually retires to a monastery for the rest of his life. And I think he dies just 1 year later. All right, so that was it. A lot of information here on Luther and the early Protestant Reformation. Next time we'll take a look at the other Protestant religions and what they do. All right, see you later.